Will national debts affect a country's ability to move into the E-age?
I don't really think so. I think when you're looking at hardware and software and infrastructure, those costs, again, are decreasing. The real cost is to have the intellectual capital, to have the knowledge workers who are able to deliver these services.
Mm-hmm. We have a question now from Puebla, from the Universidad Tecnológico de Tecamachaco in Puebla, Mexico. Welcome. Your question, please.
Good morning, everybody. A greeting to all of you. Our question is the following. What is the impact of the e-organization in peoples, in towns, in peoples that are famined and famished? And how does this affect, and how does the e-organization affect the general labor climate, and especially Latin America, where you have countries that are very poor?
A good question.
Yeah. I think that what we're talking about in terms of information technology is the ability to put the world on a competitive, even scale. So even if you're in an area which does not have the infrastructure, it's easier today via satellite as one mechanism to set up a communications infrastructure for that small town to essentially get on the internet in a short period of time.
The digital divide, if I may continue on what Mr. Mahon just said, is a real issue. It is even a real issue here in the United States, where those people who have access to technology and those people who do not have access to technology. Now, recently there are some enterprises, private companies, private enterprises, who are starting to work with people who are deprived, people who don't have access to technology, and to bring them into this new world of e-organizations, e-learning, and e-solutions. There are some patterns there, and we can discuss those on email, if you will, after our broadcast, because that's a much more complicated issue than we can address in a few seconds here.
There is a problem of differential access even in very developed countries, even in California. It's the wealthier and more educated have access to the internet and the technologies at a much higher rate than other segments. Thank you for your calls. During our next module, Michael Mahon will explore a framework that your organization can follow for becoming an e-organization.
For many organizations in the United States, now that the year 2000 computing bug has passed, it is time to refocus on e-business strategies. Electronic business, or e-business, as it is commonly referred to, is seen as the first new revolution in business process since the industrial age at the turn of the 21st century. Now in the 21st century, electronic communication and its ability to span the commercial world as we know it is moving at what some industry observers define as web speed. What exactly is web speed? In terms of e-business, web speed is the ability to communicate electronically with business partners, employees, and customers in an instantaneous fashion at the speed of electrons, which is a virtual representation of being in the same physical space at the same time. The only disadvantage I can see is you cannot go to lunch after the virtual meeting is over. Web speed is essentially real time in the sense that at 3 p.m. on Monday in San Diego, California, I am able to collaborate with and train a business partner in Sydney, Australia, where the time is 8 a.m. Tuesday on a new product just brought to market. Prior to the development of a host of online collaboration tools, most companies would send 1 or 2 employees to Australia or Asia or Latin America to educate their key partners on the benefits of whatever the new product or service was. Is this real-world scenario what is meant by the e-organization? For terms of this discussion, I will define the e-organization as the glue that links employees, business partners, and other key participants in the online exchange of intellectual capital. Why the emphasis on intellectual capital? Because that is what is driving the move toward a fully connected business and educational world. As more and more of the industrial world manufacturing processes become automated with computers and robots, the main differentiation between organizations will be their ability to access and use intellectual capital. For example, with a tool like Learning Space from IBM's Lotus Development Corporation, an American company at lotus.com, can train employees halfway around the world at web speed. This ability to communicate collaboratively over public communication networks, such as the Internet, is a tremendous boon to any business that is making an investment in the e-organization. First of all, with a product like Learning Space, the company saves transportation and lodging costs. Secondly, that subject matter expert, or SME, that was going to be on a plane for 4 hours can now engage in an online intellectual exchange for an hour or so, then return to their professional duties at their home base. In the non-electronic world, that same individual would be flying in and out of various geographic locations to communicate about this new product or service. Probably a good example would be Henry Kissinger, the American diplomat during the Nixon administration, and his brand of shuttle diplomacy. Today, many of his accomplishments of meeting and greeting can be done using collaborative computing methods and video conferencing. In the e-organization, with the proper tools, staff, and a modern infrastructure, the organization can save not only money, but also time in being able to use their subject matter expert, not in one, but several global locations in the same day without that person leaving the home office. In the consulting business, this is called cycle time. In this case of our subject matter expert is available for multiple cycles in a single day. This is only one of the many features of the e-organization, but this is very key since the virtual organization will be the model for communication that business and governments will follow in the near future. As most governments around the world now realize, the reinvention of their organizations is essential for increasing national wealth and raising their standard of living. Since the organization of today and tomorrow will be based on knowledge and expertise, the more cycles you get out of your subject matter experts, then the more profitable your organization will be. In the e-organization, time really is money. What we will find is that in a virtual world, lifelong learning is an essential aspect of e-business, and that the Internet has emerged as a powerful tool for commerce, education, trading, and organizational development. Companies like Lotus are moving aggressively to address this need with comprehensive, high-quality offerings for both learners and content developers. Now it will be much easier for organizations to address the learning needs of their workers, students, customers, and partners, and find the global vendor relationships they are seeking for this critical business requirement. As a user of these enhanced information distribution systems, such as Learning Space, look for features such as scalable, asynchronous, and real-time distributed learning. These capabilities allow learners to interact with business partners and trainers in live virtual classes, collaborate with classmates on assignments, or work on course materials alone at their own pace, regardless of their physical locations. According to the International Development Corporation, or IDC, in an April 1998 report, The Emerging Market for Web-Based Training, the U.S. market for web-based training is expected to exceed $6 billion by 2002, representing a compound annual growth rate of nearly 95% from 1997 to 2002. IDC estimates that e-commerce will grow from $111 billion reported in 1999 to 1.3 trillion in the year 2003. And 86% of this projected total will come from the rapidly emerging business-to-business segment. In addition to collaborative benefits of technology on the e-organization, there are the self-serving benefits. As an organization, you spend thousands to millions of dollars on printing, distribution, and rewriting business content, organization materials, and monthly reports. With e-business tools such as Cold Fusion from Alaire Corporation, Alaire.com, it is now possible to write your product, service, and intellectual information online and enable users to self-serve themselves at any time of the day or night. In the U.S. today, about 50% of large corporations and government institutions use the Internet to distribute general-purpose information online. A good example of intellectual content being sold online can be found at sabamahon.com, where intellectual property can be reviewed and then purchased online. Once a credit card transaction is approved online, then content can be immediately downloaded to your desktop anywhere in the world. Let me now give you a little bit of background on the history of the e-organization. In the early 70s, the U.S. Department of Justice began the deregulation of the United States telecommunications industry with the breakup of the Bell companies. The breakup produced AT&T as the sole long-distance carrier and several regional Bell operating companies, or Reeboks, for local access. I think it is fair to say that this was the beginning of the explosive growth that we now see on every continent in the world when we discuss a business's ability to become an e-organization via the advances in telecommunications. This breakup of the Bell companies was also significant in that it opened up what was once a regulated market to competition and allowed MCI, which is now MCI WorldCom, to compete head-to-head with AT&T. Up until this time, AT&T had a monopoly in the American telecommunications industry. This event also signaled the beginning of what industry experts see today as a time when the rapid integration of telecommunications and computing devices began by introducing a broad array of wire, satellite, and wireless communications devices. The significance of the Bell operating companies, the phone company breakup by the U.S. government, is that this was one of the first steps necessary in order to move toward the democratization of telecommunications and computing. After the breakup, the cost of telecommunications was put on a competitive, non-monopolistic level. That single change accelerated the rate of growth of the organizations, since the key essential of the electronic age is to have access to reliable and inexpensive telecommunications. Today, this integration of general-purpose computing and telecommunications devices is used daily by business, education, and government organizations throughout the world, mesh of electronic voice, video, and data devices commonly referred to as the enterprise. I believe that it is quite common for many in the audience today to use one form or aspect of the e-organization, electronic mail, to make worldwide contacts. This was not always the case as recently as 1995. As early as the middle of the 1980s, there was strong evidence that the marriage between general-purpose computing and telecommunications was going to change the way the world conducted business in the future by integrating voice, video, graphics, and data in a single enterprise network. Three issues that delayed global acceptance of the e-organization were direct government intervention, proprietary systems, and very high costs. I hope some of you still remember the futuristic commercials from Wang Laboratories, which aired in 1985 and featured a reference to Wang mail. The 30-second TV commercial showed electronic mail going around the globe at the speed of light. That was an early adoption of electronic mail by business and government, and one of the first commercial uses of electronic communication. However, it was a proprietary closed mail system such that the U.S. State Department could send electronic mail within U.S. embassies throughout the world, but not to outside electronic mail users. The U.S. State Department had built a very efficient method of instant electronic mail communication within their own network, but it was not standards-based, and it was therefore closed off to other proprietary mail systems. Now, with the advances in open communication platforms, any American or foreigner can contact federal and state agencies by electronic mail and view online information at their .gov websites. For example, I recently used the IRS.gov to obtain information on filing 1999 income taxes. Events have changed so radically for government in the past few years that I am participating in a pilot program with the Internal Revenue Service called e-file. In this pilot program, all tax filing communication is done electronically. For the past 2 years, I have been able to send in my tax returns and pay additional taxes or receive a refund from my computer to theirs. This is one form of electronic government at its best and demonstrate where the e-organization is going. Information will become more ubiquitous and easier and faster to access as organizations move toward an electronic information model. This free and open exchange of information is in marked contrast to those early days of electronic media integration at most major corporations and government institutions, where the telephony and computing systems used to send electronic messages were closed off to those outside the organization. So I believe the rise in the e-organization in the early 1990s, a firm like General Motors could not send an electronic message to a large parts supplier that may also have an electronic messaging system because they were not compatible. In those days, most large corporations and government agencies had an electronic mail network, but it was isolated to outsiders. Today, information systems and organizations are very, very different. If we look back at a few years ago, the market for electronic communication devices was still dependent on proprietary, high-cost integrated platforms that were still the domain of those wealthy organizations that could afford the initial capital cost and annual maintenance contract. Now, in the first quarter of the 2000, after the majority of the business world and governments have dodged the Y2K bullet, everyone's eye is now on e-business and how it will benefit present and future organizational goals. So what makes an organization an e-organization? I have found in tracing the evolution of the e-organization that there are 3 significant events that have led to the development of this new organizational model. One is the rapid advance in the convergence of telecommunications and information processing technology. 2 is the application of English as a universal business language, in part due to many computing languages being written in English. And 3, it is the U.S. government's opening up their proprietary global network called ARPANET. How did the world of communications and information technology move from proprietary to open systems in such a short period of time? I think that much of the credit will go in the years to come to the rapid utilization of the Internet. ARPANET, a system that was once for the exclusive use of the U.S. Department of Defense in the early 80s, has evolved into the commercial Internet. What the Internet has done for electronic communication is to provide almost anyone with inexpensive global access to what once was proprietary communication systems used by government, major universities, and large corporations. Now, an inexpensive information highway exists to send voice, video, and data across the world on a protocol standard called Internet Protocol, or IP. What the Internet is doing for medium-sized businesses, individuals, and foreign governments is to open up global telecommunications highways for anyone who has a modem, web browser, and access to an Internet service provider, or ISP. For less than $500, I can purchase a fully equipped internet platform and then pay $20 a month for access anywhere in the world. This single communication protocol, called IP, has in just a few years brought medium-sized corporations and smaller governments into direct competition and on equal footing with world-class organizations when it comes to global communications. Today, it is easy for me to see how recent advances in computing and telecommunications have irreversibly changed the way the world does business at home and abroad. The E-organization owes much of its recent rise to the end of the Cold War with Russia. This event has allowed the U.S. government to open up its once classified global network to the global community. Second, the recent explosive growth of the Internet has made it a feasible alternative to conventional business strategies for many businesses that once considered electronic commerce to be out of reach. Many of the uses of the Internet, such as electronic mail and wide area networking, or WAN, have been in use by large corporations for many years. Beginning in the middle of 1995, the sheer number of Internet service providers offering Internet products and services make these same enabling technologies affordable and available for any business, especially the small to medium-sized operations. It is safe to say that as time goes on, the E-organization will continue to evolve as business tools for international commerce, education, and training are improved. You may recall that only 10 years ago, if you did not have a fax machine, it was inferred by default that you were not serious about doing business. A facsimile was the electronic device that separated the serious from the not-so-serious business operation. In the year 2000, the age of electronic communication will differentiate the local for the global E-organization. You may ask what the criteria are that will separate a global from a local E-organization. From my perspective, there are several factors, but probably the single most important one for executives and administrators is to have a vision of how this electronic technology will benefit their organization's employees, business partners, and customers. Therefore, it is important to address the steps needed to establish a sound business process using these new technologies. It has been my experience over the years that many organizations become so involved with the cachet of new technology that they see it as an easy fix to solve ongoing organizational problems. This then results in the organization losing sight of the business process or objective they were trying to achieve. So when I'm on a consulting engagement, the first question I ask senior executives and administrators is what they are trying to accomplish for the organization with the use of information technology. Are they looking to improve corporate communications, reduce costs, or provide better customer service? Keeping in mind whether their goals may be is key. What I have learned over the years is that information technology is not a magic bullet for a poorly defined or mismanaged organization. In other words, putting the latest advances in information processing, such as wide area networks, online distance learning, or internet access for all employees, will not solve the problems of a poorly run or ill-defined organization. On the other hand, if your organization is operating at the peak of efficiency, then there are many benefits that can be derived from enhanced electronic communication. Again, with this new technology and freedom comes a specific set of rules and responsibilities. A common mistake that I see among managers and educators is that they delegate an understanding of information technology to others. This is a big mistake. Today's business and education leaders must clearly understand how information and technology will benefit their organizations. Just as they understand budgets, facilities management principles, and staffing requirements, they need to understand that IT is merely another piece of their administrative domain. Those who fail to grasp this new administrative role will certainly fail as a leader as time goes on. With this new wave of electronic freedom also comes increased responsibility. Never in the history of corporate communications has it been easier to set up an electronic organization and more difficult to keep the operations up to date. So what is the next step in setting up an e-organization? Well, we must have access to an IT talent pool. One of the crucial steps in setting up or keeping your e-organization going is to have the ability to recruit and retain qualified staff. Like the American labor market, the rest of the world is recognizing that there are a finite number of subject matter experts in the information and communications systems marketplace to employ. So even though you have a solid business strategy to expand and capital is no object toward moving into an e-organization, it is possible that your growth rate will be limited to the number of talented people you can recruit. The U.S. Department of Labor recently forecasted that those workers with computing and telecommunications skills will be in demand until the year 2010. It is safe to assume that what is occurring in the U.S. labor market will occur within those countries seeking to increase their standard of living by defining the e-organization as a strategic initiative. How can smaller organizations compete with large, well-financed companies for the same labor pool? The answer is to treat employees with a sense of partnership rather than as merely workers. This new need trend is one of the reasons many information workers are going to .com companies for stock options. If the company does well, the employee shares in the wealth recognized in the stock option. There must also be systems in place to provide continuous training. This is not only important for employees, but also for the company. Products like Lotus Development's Learning Space, which I mentioned earlier, and LiveLink, available from opentext.com, are just two of the platforms which are necessary to keep your workforce fully engaged, whether they are working in the office, at home, or at a client site. In addition to building dynamic pools of employees, the e-organization must have a modern infrastructure in order to support information which is incoming from and outgoing to the outside world with high-speed electronic communications. Again, the rapid advances in telecommunications, a medium-sized business can obtain high-speed access by installing digital subscriber line or DSL technology at a fraction of the cost of traditional dedicated circuits. For example, a T1 line that is offered by local telephone companies with a speed of 1.5 megabits costs around $1,500 per month, while a DSL 1.5 megabit line will cost around $400 per month, which is a tremendous savings of $13,200 a year. However, in addition to high-speed telecommunications, your infrastructure will also require network routers and high-speed servers to run your e-organization's business internals. Again, there are other e-organizations that can help you with your need for a modern infrastructure if you decide it is too costly or you do not have the talent pool to manage the information processing environment. These firms are called application service providers, or ASPs, and their primary role in life is to provide you with infrastructure services that you do not have or that you do not want to bother with. What kind of services can you obtain from an ASP? Typical services are accounting and human resource management. If you have a manufacturing operation or want to automate that process with enterprise resource planning or ERP applications, then your organization can also obtain these services from an ASP. The advantage with this approach in building an e-organization is that you do not need the technical resources to manage what an ASP can do for you, and you do not have to invest the capital in the purchase and maintenance of hardware and software. Using the ASP business model, you merely pay by the drink or what you use. A few companies that have gained brand name recognition in North America over the past year as respectful full-service ASPs are the firms like Choreo.com and Epcor.com. As the chart shows, a firm like Choreo offers a complete suite of business solutions from human resource to customer relationship management to enterprise resource planning or ERP manufacturing. As the talent pool for technical resources continues to dry up around the world and the cost of infrastructure remains high, the ASP solution is one that is just starting to build momentum. In your organization's interests lie in a single solution, then there are services from specialized ASPs. If you are interested in a web-based telecommunication service, then telepost.com allows you to use the web for telephone services, or sabamahon.com enables you to move your intellectual capital from print to electronically publishing on the internet. I believe that as the application services provider model matures over the next year, we can expect the range of ASPs to expand more and more into the established brick-and-mortar world of business and education. So what is the next step for an organization wanting to become an e-organization? More than likely, it is the need to develop a business strategy. This strategy will be the integration of your present business model with the features and benefits of electronic communication. At times, this business strategy could be something very ordinary and quite simple. Recently, a company in Los Angeles, California, came up with the idea that selling U.S. postage stamps online could be a profitable business. The recent launch of Stamps.com website lets customers purchase stamps online and then have a stamp printed on an envelope at their office printer. This is not a breakthrough in internet technology, but it is certainly a viable business model, and no one else was doing it. The one thing Stamps.com had, in addition to capital, was a good consulting group to work out a business strategy. International professional service firms like IBM Global Services, IBM.com, and KPMG International, KPMG.com, are there to help business executives define what it is they need to do in developing an e-organization strategy. I think that any organization of any size should always consider getting expert advice before spending money on employees, computing equipment, or business partners. I have seen many cases where a failure to have a sound business strategy led to costly failures. The beauty of electronic communication is the openness and freedom that it can offer any business, but mistakes are made when management fails to realize the complexity that sits behind the simplicity of the internet. A saying that I am fond of is that most businesses do not plan to fail, they fail to plan. When seeking expert advice, remember that information technology consultants come in all price ranges and with various levels of expertise. Probably the two most important criteria to look for in evaluating a consultant you want to engage is that they are familiar with business process from a senior management perspective, and that they fully understand the many aspects of information technology from an enterprise perspective. In general, be sure to seek the advice of consultants who understand the enterprise perspective so that they will be able to adequately address the hardware platforms, enterprise applications, enterprise networks, ISP and ASP offerings, and most important, information systems business process in a single solution. A consultant that has had success in rolling out Windows NT local area networks is not an enterprise-wide computing subject matter expert. Finally, you can also use the internet to obtain expert advice. In many cases, all you are looking for is a second opinion to verify that your e-organization plan makes sense. In such a case, independent consulting firms such as sabamahon.com can assess your goals and provide guidance using conference calls and electronic mail. This novel practice is being defined as executive coaching in a recent book titled The Future of Work. The authors describe a new twist to virtual consulting,